Hello everyone and welcome back to Mindful Money with Max. Today I have a very special guest and friend, Jesse Nichols.
Howdy.
Jesse Nichols here is a world-class rock climber, entrepreneur, cypherpunk, and just all-around good guy. I'm excited. We've got a lot to talk about today. So we actually just finished up climbing a pretty fun day. So one of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to Jesse today is because this podcast is all about money, meaning, purpose, and how we can all live truly rich and fulfilling lives. And when I look at Jesse and I've seen his life, he may not have $1 billion, but this guy has a very rich life. It's full of experiences, doing things he loves, and really just being unapologetically himself. Jesse, I just want you to start and explain to me what true wealth means to you, because I get to see you living out your dreams, and I get to see you traveling to places, setting goals, reaching those goals, and really just living a life that you're proud of. So could you explain a little bit more about how you've come to live this life of your dreams?
Yeah, it's a pretty dreamy life. I can't deny it. I think with wealth, there's a preconception a lot of people have. So I think I'll start with like what it isn't, because it isn't success. It doesn't mean happiness. That's why you really need the mindfulness part or the contemplative side of it, or the abstract philosophical side of it, which if you really want to think about wealth, I think what you really want to see is how you make the world different. What can you cause to happen? And this comes from my favorite physicist, thinker, philosopher, David Deutsch. And he talks about how wealth is the collection of tasks or things that you could do that allow you to change the world or make some physical transformation happen in the world. Whether that's taking seed from the ground and creating crops, or if you have the mind of Elon and you know how to make a rocket ship, or if you're a brain surgeon, you know how to transform and fix the central nervous system.
So it sounds kind of like what you're saying is that wealth is being able to create in ways that gives back.
It doesn't really have to be about giving back, I don't think. In my mind, I think it's a side effect that the world gets better. I think as someone who has a strong sense of individualism, I think if you take care of yourself, if you be to a certain degree selfish, you know, Ayn Rand has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, which is, you know, going against the grain, talking about this thing that's normally considered as bad, but the alternative is that you're someone who gets taken advantage of, you get taken for a ride. Whereas if you focus on your own problems, you're gonna have solutions that the side effect can make the world better, but it's not the direct thing. I think if you try and change the world, you end up a lot of the time doing the same thing when people try and chase success. They think it means like, oh, I have the 3-car garage, I have, you know, these material things, but what really matters is the ideas that you have in your head that can check off all the boxes of Maslow's needs. You know, you have food, shelter, warmth, but above that, I think eliminating suffering is way easier than chasing joy. And the byproduct is that you become happy. Or the state of mind is, oh, I don't have to worry. I think people forget how much abundance we have, not just in modern conveniences, but of medicine and safety. And the supply of goods and services that we have available to us in the West is pretty undervalued, taken for granted. And yeah, it's all connected in these ideas of wealth, success, happiness, suffering. They're all interrelated, and picking them apart is another kind of knowledge. A lot of people are just making ends meet. Most of the world, I remember reading a book by William McCaskill, Effective Altruist book. They were talking about how the West, you're the 1% of the world. Like, especially if you talk about, like, the average person is 1%. Whereas like the billionaires, the 1% of the West, those people are super rare. But if you're born in the West, and that includes Singapore, Japan, Indonesia, parts of Indonesia,
Developed nations,
like then you are part of the 1%. You have so much abundance. You have so many reasons to be optimistic about the future. You have so much agency. Yeah, and our worldviews are skewed by whatever bleeds leads, the media, it's just an unhealthy diet of information that people have, and they see doom and gloom, and they don't know how to get out of it.
So that leads me to the next thing I wanted to ask you. And before I jump into that, I just wanted to say that Jesse here actually shared a lot of books on philosophy and science and just really interesting topics with me when I was like, 13 or 14 years old. And that really jump-started a lot of the direction in my life. And so we've stayed close over the years, and that's just another reason why I'm so excited to have him here. But that leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is, what, in your opinion, is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of creating a wealthier world, a more abundant society, more smiles per capita on planet Earth?
I think some of the most broken things in the world are things that we have interest in, which is monetary policy, which sounds so like, if you're tuning into a podcast about mindfulness and a guy starts talking about monetary policy, you're like, what is that, left field?
So monetary policy, money, how money works, how the capital markets work.
Yeah. And beyond that, just what these governments' relationship with currency is, the state's involvement in currency. I think that would be one of the more transformative things. If we were able to get a sound, hard money, it would make the world dramatically less coercive. Because I think coercion from the state or the government, whether you're on the left or the right side of the aisle, I think when you have a government that has too much control, it becomes really problematic when people are overregulated, overtaxed, or just coerced in any way.
I feel really aligned in that opinion. I really think that taxation through inflation is really one of the main issues that we're dealing with as a global society. I really think that people's hard work is getting outsourced to paper that can just be printed on demand, and people don't fully understand how their hard work is being bled dry. They don't understand how they're saving and working in a form of wealth that is losing value over time. And they don't understand this incredible separation between people that understand that system and own assets and borrow against them tax-free, and the people that are basically acquiring all the wealth that they have through just regular wages, which is just taxed straight off the top.
Yeah, which is, there's that term that goes around on X all the time of, like, you're a wagey. Oh, look at this poor little wagey.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's like...
I think about that all the time, though. I mean, if you're just a W-2 employee, unless you're making a ton of money, it seems very difficult to get ahead. And I'm actually surprised that you said that one of the best ways that we can get ahead as a world is changes in monetary policy. I didn't pay him to say that, I swear, but we're actually really aligned in that way. I think wealth and the way that we store wealth is kind of at the core of a lot of the world's problems today. But that leads me to my next question, which I'd like to ask each of the guests here. And that is, what is one thing that you think children aren't learning in schools that they should be in order to create a better world and to create a better society? And before you jump into it, I'll just give my example. I think, and I'm of course a little bit biased here, that children should be taught more about financial education. I think children should be taught more about like how mortgages work, how car loans work, how taxes work, how investing works, because I look back on my education, even in high school and college, and I'm surprised how little applicable financial knowledge was shared with us. And so I'd love to see that changed. And I have a few other things I think that children should be taught more of in schools, but I'd be really interested to hear what your answer is on that.
Yeah, I think the question is the same structure as who should rule when it comes down to politics, which is, if you ask a bunch of people across society who should run society, the mathematicians will say the mathematicians, the philosophers will say the philosopher kings, and here the finance guys saying finance things. So I think, to depart from what you're saying a little bit, which is just, the only thing that you really need to learn is how to problem solve. Like we talk a lot about critical thinking, but creativity and disobedience is, I think, the thing that we turn off when kids go through traditional education. Like if you go to a public school, you're being taught how to work in a factory. You're being, like, our government is so slow to update to the market. We're not learning applicable things that are going to get you ahead in life. You're learning things to keep the same. Like traditional schooling is traditional because it's teaching you the things that we've learned over generations, but there's blind spots in that. And one of the big blind spots in traditional education is just how powerful children's creativity is and how evil it is to program kids standardizing their thinking when reality is so much bigger and interconnected that if you look at homeschoolers or people who are educated in the home, they have way more autonomy, way more individuality. They take their creativity seriously. They take their ability to solve their own problems seriously. Like if they have, they want to start a business at 12, they can, and then they're going to learn about finance. They're going to learn how to run their books, and they're going to learn financial literacy if they go down any entrepreneurial pursuit long enough. And it's mainly due to the competition in the market. That's if you're going to be outcompeted, you have to learn how to overcome these abstract financial problems, and you're only going to be able to do that creatively. If you're lucky, maybe, or I don't know if you could even call it luck, that someone would like teach you all these things like a mentor or something. But if you take individualism seriously, it's never that someone pours knowledge into your head at school, whether it's about financial literacy or not. It's about wanting to learn something and doing it yourself. It always comes from within, is what I'm trying to say. So these subjects at school that you're taught, you could learn them all outside school and probably better. So disobedience and creativity is...
That's a great summary. So
what you should learn.
It kind of sounds like you're saying to teach kids how to think for themselves.
Yeah.
And think outside of the box.
And the byproduct is that eventually they'll learn what they need to learn. Like school is really good at helping you solve problems that you don't currently have in your life.
So kind of getting these kids to cut their teeth on real world problems and create real world solutions.
Yeah.
And
like to actually go out into the world and affect it, to see what reality is, because school gives you sometimes great resources if you want to be in a science lab early, or when you go to university, you'll want to learn something that takes an accreditation, whether it be like law or medicine. But outside of that, if you look at the whole field of software, some of the best software developers I know dropped out of high school and are just completely self-taught, because software is the best example of a sector of the economy that's outpaced government. It's outpaced the government's ability to regulate it.
Well said.
Uber is disrupted, taxis, social networks disrupted, what were traditionally the social hubs of society, whether for better or worse. There's all kinds of new problems that come along with the decentralization that comes along with the internet.
So expanding on that whole real world creativity, I know you've been working on something that's been really fascinating for a while now, your infinite Waze wall. Could you explain a little bit to everybody your infinite Waze wall and the idea? Because it's mind-blowing to me, and I hope to see it come into reality in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's an idea. How can we simulate free solo rock climbing?
Okay.
If that's the problem, how do you solve it?
And so what is free solo rock climbing for everyone out there?
We're not a climbing podcast. Free soloing is climbing without a rope. You might have seen Alex Honnold free solo El Capitan, or he just did the Taipei 101. Free soloing is the most free form of climbing,
where you can just keep going without having to stop, and you don't need a rope.
Yeah, you could just. I think it's the best form of a rugged individualism in a sport.
But you also don't want to die. You want to enjoy the experience, but you don't want to die. So how can we combine those two things and create a really cool experience for people in the future?
So the idea is, if you want to simulate free solo climbing without the negative side of you fall, you die, is virtual reality. So I was a huge fan, still am, of The Matrix when it came out. Just completely blew my mind that you could create an experience that's indistinguishable from the real experience. And that led me to develop this, or that sparked this curiosity of computer science, simulation, virtual reality. And philosophy that comes out of it, which is death is bad as like
yes, it is.
as a starting point, but climbing's awesome. Like the movement and the health of like, so there's a conflict here. I think any problem is a conflict between ideas, and value creation comes from solving the conflict, which is like if you go back to electricity and magnetism being two different fields, and then now they're electromagnetism. We resolved a conflict and we understood the world better.
So practically speaking, what does this infinite Waze wall look like?
Yeah.
And what steps do you need to take to turn that dream into reality?
Yeah. So right now we have virtual reality headsets that are just pretty much goggles on your face, and they have head tracking to be able to simulate where you are in an environment in a game engine, which is just a virtual world, whether you play Grand Theft Auto, World of Warcraft, or any of these big open world games where you have a high degree of freedom. The idea is to create a vertical treadmill, like a treadmill that can change directions. And these have existed since I think the 90s, but to merge a treadmill, a vertical treadmill, a tread wall with a headset, with a VR headset and full body motion capture within a narrative game element or a game engine with story elements, with progression, as well as just hard climbing.
So you would actually be using your hands and feet as if you were really climbing, but you'd be simulated in the headset being on El Capitan, like Alex Honnold.
Yeah, you could like the idea is that eventually you could get to a place where the graphics are indistinguishable from real life, and you could simulate the holds on a 2D plane rotating surface. And just like if you imagine a grid of holds, you could, in virtual reality, select the holds that you want the user to climb in the sequence, the path of rock. And these rocks or these experiences can be anywhere from 100 to 5,000 feet, which doesn't even exist in the world. El Capitan's 3,000 feet. There's some that are a little bigger, but...
So you could be like Lord of the Rings climbing, like some fantasy land.
You could be climbing a 15-degree overhanging wall for 1,000 feet on the side of Mordor. The infinite Waze comes from infinite possibilities, not just in the sequence of climbing, but mapped also to the experience that you're having. You could do a different sequence, but you could also be in a completely different world. Whether it be Lord of the Rings environment or it's completely scale independent as well. So you could climb on an asteroid going through the cosmos. You could climb the rungs of a DNA strand. All these it's a pretty silly movie, but Osmosis Jones took this idea.
I haven't heard that in a long time. That's funny.
But I really like Lord of the Rings, and how if you go to Tuolumne Meadows in Yosemite, it's all these peaks are, you got Hobbit Book, you got Mordor, you got all these Lord of the Rings inspired peaks because it's such a fairy tale environment. And one of the things I have up on just this little preview site of infiniteways.io, it's this story that takes this Yosemite experience. Like, we've climbed the nose together, we've climbed on El Capitan, but to do it in the best style, like Alex Honnold, is unattainable for 99%.
Well,
of
what's
climbers.
the definition of best?
Well, the best style is naked, barefoot, free solo, El Capitan.
I mean, is it, or is it just the guy having the most fun?
But there's fair argument there. Fair argument. But aesthetically, if you take out the subjective experience and you just be like, what's the best way for a humanoid or human?
Humanoid.
Because one of the things I like to think about is there's a big robotics push right now. And I think one of the coolest things right now, there's a lot of these Chinese companies, American companies are doing teleoperated boxing with robots, humanoid robots.
Oh, wow.
So I think it'd be awesome to have humanoid robot rock climbing competitions.
Oh.
Where you're putting humanoid robots on a surface and you're programming a different route, and you're just challenging. It's a different kind of
experience,
competition that you could have that would push robotics and engineering forward.
That's pretty damn cool.
And it would be pretty cool too, I think, because it also has military or training capabilities.
So like remote controlled humanoid robot kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
used for fun and not violence.
Yeah. But also, I think it'd be cool to have experiences where you're climbing, doing, night ops with a pistol, and you're climbing. Like the possibilities are infinite.
Infinite ways.
When you're talking about virtual worlds and interfacing with these mixed reality or these location-based virtual reality experiences, these things are
Exciting.
It's super exciting. I've been thinking about it for years, and the things that are holding it back, the next steps are to actually start building a prototype.
So throw a shameless plug in there. What kind of people are you looking for to turn that into reality? Like programmers, like climbing specialists.
The stack is Unreal Engine.
What's Unreal Engine for
Unreal
everyone out
Engine's
there?
a game engine.
Okay.
Game engines are just any kind of software that allow you to program virtual games. So that could be, what comes out in Unreal Engine? Probably Fortnite's the biggest game that's programmed in Unreal Engine, but another one, Arc Raiders, that just came out.
Mm-hmm.
But these game engines give you the ability to program experiences when you couple them with virtual reality, because virtual reality, the thing why it's so great is because it gives you this individualism. It gives you this sense of, I control where I go. And on a climbing wall, it's kind of like one of my favorite games. You ever play Star Fox 64?
I have not.
It's an on-rails shooter. So you're like going down a path. You could go this far out, but within those bounds, you could do whatever you want. You could shoot wherever you want. And I think eventually you get to a place where on a climbing wall, you could climb 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. And I think as I get older, like bouldering is getting harder and harder. But the thing I love is like long days in the mountains. But the thing that it's conflicted with the other part, which is the other part of the mission, which is the possibility that we defeat aging. And what if in my lifespan, we were able to make medicine so good that we were able to have our health span be, you're in the 20s for an indefinite period of time. And if I die rock climbing,
I lose that potential.
You've dropped the bag.
So I mean, human life is more precious than ever.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah, because it's potentially like you could live, we have hydras, lobsters, green sharks that live hundreds of years, tortoises. And these things are proof that biology has figured out how to prevent the damage accumulation that comes from biological aging and to repair those things, which is possible. And if you die if you're in the window of longevity escape velocity, which is a term by one of these biologists, Aubrey de Grey, which is if you're able to make it to 100, they cure cancer. You make it to 140, they cure the thing that was killing people at 140. Ad infinitum, you've reached longevity escape velocity, where the therapies to prevent the damage.
You can keep going indefinitely.
You just keep going, which is crazy to think about. But I want to keep climbing, but I'm also like way more risk adverse than I used to be.
Me too.
Because I know the possibilities of my generation and your generation being able to live way longer lifespans in a healthy, being healthy.
So I'll push back on that a little bit, because I think, of course, it's going to be incredibly important to help people physically, help keep their bodies healthy. But one thing I think that gets overlooked is keeping people's minds healthy. Yeah. I think we are in such a high stimulation world, and I think things like video games are great. I'm actually really excited for these more physically interactive video games that are coming, because I think people need more of that physical activity. Yeah. And people are already so tuned into video games that that's just an easy next step, and it'll probably get them to be more physical. But it's almost like there could be this like enlightenment escape velocity. Like if we are able to spread good ideas on how to have a happy life in such a powerful way, that more and more people could take on those ideas of wisdom, compassion, understanding in a way that it could actually have that same escape velocity, to where people are living happier lives instead of just longer lives.
Yeah. You don't only want quantity, you want quality. I think with the potential, like when I tell people, like, I think it's possible that solving death or eliminating aging or increasing the health span of a lifetime, these pessimistic answers come out like, well, what would you do? Life would get so boring, I'd want to die. It's like, yeah, tell that to like a 90-year-old who hasn't traveled anywhere, who, like, these people know the value of life because they know how scarce it is. It's a big theme in economics, right? Of, value comes from scarcity, but really it comes from understanding the thing that you want. Like, going back to like the diamond and the diamond in water problem or paradox. Have you heard of this?
I have not.
It's like about Austrian economics, how you value a diamond or water. There isn't anything inherently value about those two things, but a person's subjective needs make it so. So if you're in the desert, you don't need diamonds. If you don't have any water, you're going to pay everything you own to get the thing that's going to keep you going. Whereas like you would, give all the diamonds that you have with you in this desert away. But it just shows that like value doesn't come from like the inherent work done to mine that diamond and create it. It comes from the subjective desires of some entity in the market. But going back to like wisdom, yeah, I think civilization is doing okay. We're doing all right. I think a big part of being wise is like a lot of, I forget if it was Sam Harris or someone who's just like, someone had this thing about wisdom is just taking your own advice, like, and just taking the things that you know already to be true seriously, or removing those conflicts. But yeah, we are in a strange transitionary period from pre-enlightenment to a fully enlightened society, and not in like the Buddhist sense, but in the Western Enlightenment, or that in the scientific revolution, industrial revolution that came out of it. I think these enlightenments largely, David Deutsch, again, he's my favorite thinker. He wrote The Beginning of Infinity. His thesis of his most successful book, The Beginning of Infinity, was that the Enlightenment was all about people looking for good explanations about how the world is and why. And when you see that desire to understand the world, not just on a scientific basis, but on a philosophical and abstract basis, that is some of the most insightful things to understand about humanity and life, is how powerful it is to try and understand the world and find things that are true about the world. And you are a part of the world, so understanding yourself.
So I want to know, what are some of the biggest things that you've learned traveling the world and rock climbing for over 20 years now, at least?
Yeah, it's been 16, 17, maybe, something like that. Started in 16 years now. Started in 2010.
Oh, wow.
Dude, I've been, I think I mainly in the west of the United States. And man, there's such a deep love for humanity that comes from seeing how varied we are, how many ways there are to live a life. And I think one of the biggest cornerstones of my philosophy is just this idea of compassion, and seeing how much love there is in the world, whether it's people raising their kids, or climbers building little communities, or just the raw drive. A lot of these, being around like really strong climbers and seeing that motivation and that drive to improve themselves and make this very selfish activity mean something. I think it's a great part of how I view the world. But I think embracing problems has been the most fruitful thing that I've learned about how the world works. Because if you're able to love your problems and you're not attached to hanging on to ideas, like even that looking back on itself, like, why should I look at problems? Like if you remove conflicts, you understand the world and you're able to change it. I think that's incredibly powerful. And embracing the Western or enlightenment ideas of optimism that you can build great things, whether it's a climbing virtual reality company or whatever you want, as long as these things are, and there's another David Deutsch line, the momentous dichotomy is what he calls it. So anything is possible unless it's forbidden by some law of physics. So it's either possible with some set of knowledge, or it's impossible because there's some laws. Like, you can't go faster than the speed of light. You can't make a perpetual motion machine. So this momentous dichotomy leads us to say that we only fail because we don't understand something about the world. And if you embrace your problems, there's no reason why you can't make progress.
So we were talking earlier about how you work for a general counsel company that specializes in law in the artificial intelligence field. And they have some really big clients. Like you were telling me, like Columbia, the sportswear company, News Corp, Bass Pro Shop. So what's one of your biggest takeaways working in this like AI law field recently?
Yeah, so I was the first hire in the support team helping people with software. And the thing about artificial intelligence that people undervalue is that it's going to take people's creativity away from them.
That's a great answer.
I think people are fearful that they're going to be replaced by AI, but they're missing the opportunity that they currently have in their hands that no other generation has had before, which is like Google was revolutionary with a search engine. This is a 10x improvement on a search engine, and
100x. I mean, it's so instant, the ability to get new niche information.
Yeah. So this is a huge opportunity to accelerate your understanding of the world and to be able to level the playing field of what we could build off of. Like it's the Luddite Fallacy.
100%.
It's there's a great Twitter and website called the Pessimist Archive, saying, "Oh, there's radio. The radio is gonna poison the youth." Like, or the television, like all these, and you go back even further. Oh, these kids are reading these trash novels now that we have these printing presses. Like these printing presses, you better watch out. They're gonna hurt humanity. Like, it's crazy.
So embracing new technology, just being a part of that future.
Technology is a tool. If you use the tool to your advantage, instead of, you could be an enemy of civilization. You could do bad things with any technology, but to choose to build, not to take, I think is the best takeaway from AI.
So one other thing I wanted to talk to you, Jesse, about is you touched on how monetary policy, the way that we interact with money in the capital markets and government's influence on that, has such a big role in shaping the world, and positivity versus negativity. And if we can, the line is fix the money, fix the world. One other thing that I'm really passionate about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is the global wealth gap. Because sometimes people look at that and they think of it as immediately good or immediately bad. Well, very few people, unless you're a multi-billionaire, probably think of it as immediately good. But in the sense that anytime we've seen technological improvement across humanity, there's been an increase in that wealth gap. So the wealth gap isn't necessarily a bad thing. It often coincides with an increase in like overall technology and abundance. But sometimes that gap gets stretched too far to the point where it's actually reducing the living standards of average people, kind of like how we saw in France during their revolution hundreds of years ago, and how we've kind of seen in a lot of developed nations in the last few decades, where living standards have kind of collapsed for average everyday people. So I'm wondering what you think is, number one, the solution to raising living standards for most people, and what do you see the wealth gap implications being going forward?
Yeah, I think with wealth gaps, there's two big things, which is if you have a wealth gap, the real problem is where the floor is, not where the ceiling is. So if the floor is you own a planet, like you could have someone who owns 10 planets and can transmute suns and all that stuff, like go super sci-fi.
Sci-fi.
But really the problem is viewing these things as static. These are moving targets, and the economy produces wealth from nothing. It comes from the creativity of our minds to be able to transform the world and to create goods and services that solve people's problems.
Mm-hmm.
And with a wealth gap, you could have ever-growing pie, not a fixed pie.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think the economy is this, if I win, it means you lose. It's this non-zero sum game, which is a bad way of thinking about it, when really the pie expands as we create better goods and services and trade with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the real thing that is problematic with wealth generation and a lot of these billionaires is really the cronyism, the crony capitalism.
Mm.
We don't live in a capitalistic world. So there's this big trend of people thinking that we need to take from the billionaires so we could, lift the floor, when really we need to raise the whole thing. Billionaires need to get richer, and
Your average everyday
and
people do too.
we need to keep eliminating poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, people don't realize how much we have lifted people out of poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, we're living in the most abundant time, the safest time, the least violent time.
For sure.
And so it's those two things.
Well, I would say maybe the last 40 years have somewhat been an exception, depending on where you go in developed nations.
Yeah.
Just because the loss of purchasing power has been so severe for like lower and middle class people.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll ask is, where do you think something like universal basic income could fit? Now, I'm not saying I'm pro or against. I'm pretty neutral at it right now, while I'm still trying to get more information and research the topic. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think UBI, universal basic, it's just a rebranded socialism.
Okay.
I think the idea that you get to a post-scarcity society, that AI and robotics is producing so much wealth that we're going to need to redistribute money to poor people. I think that view doesn't take seriously the idea that once you solve a problem, new problems will arise. When we had the Luddites, going back to them, when the loom was coming out, when we were industrializing textiles, what happened? Those people didn't all starve to death. They moved on. They became maybe blacksmiths and machinists and repairmen and plumbers. And the economy is like, there will always be problems that people have in their life, and those problems can be solved by the market if you unburden and free the people to, trade among themselves.
That's one thing that I kind of wrestle with, is that one hand, I want everybody to be taken care of, obviously, and have enough and have an abundance, a surplus. But on the other hand, if people are just getting these paychecks for free, I really worry about people losing a sense of purpose that they gain from these jobs. And that's kind of something I wrestle with, because I've seen what happens when people don't have purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning, even if it's just a humble job. As they say, idle hands do the devil's work. It's kind of the phrase, where if you don't have anything to do, you tend to go down a strange path. And I would worry about people, not that they have too much free time on their hands, but that they're not directing their energy towards something positive that these jobs have given them an outlet for.
Yeah, it's a big cultural problem with how do you fill your time? How do you find meaning? I think one of the best books I read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, who vividly portrayed this experience he had of going through what is one of the worst tragedies that has been put upon any people, and showed that you could still have meaning and community and positivity and optimism even in the most horrendous conditions where people are literally starving and being genocided. But to carry on and to know that if you lose your sense of meaning, that's when
you lose your purpose.
That's when life becomes, unlivable. Or you know, he would talk about how when people stopped laughing or being able to make jokes, those are the people who got sick and then were killed or just died of natural causes. But you know, just like how you could die of heartbreak, you could die of losing your meaning in some circumstances.
Well, that's a pretty awesome, comprehensive conversation. So shameless plug here, go to infiniteways.io.
Yeah.
Check out the vision, check out the futuristic idea there. Jesse Nichols on X. Is there anything you want to finish off with on how do we make the world a better place?
I think just take your life seriously. You're the hero of your own story. No problems are going to be solved for you, and enjoy your problems. They're yours. They're what make your life have topography.
I love it. I love it. So thank you for being here today, Jesse. We've got Jesse Nichols. Check him out. World-class rock climber, entrepreneur, philosopher, and just all-around good guy. Take care.
Thanks, man.
Of course.
Peace.
Yeah. We're about to change the world of money, watch the flow. New economy beats that echo, timeless rhythm. We're writing about to change the world of money, watch the flow.